Hi, I'm Patricia Grabarek.
And I'm Katina Sawyer, and welcome to the Worker Being Podcast. Today we're going to have a short little episode on millennials. We've written about this topic before, we've talked about it before, and it's been coming up a lot with us, talking about millennials in the workplace with clients and students and other folks. So we thought maybe it's coming up a lot for you. We wanted to give you a quick resource on our thoughts and how to respond when people start talking about millennials in the workplace. So, Patricia, do you want to kick it off?
Yes, I do, because this is a topic I am a little bit passionate about, actually, because I get a little bit annoyed when I hear all the millennial talk. So this is probably controversial, but millennials are just people. Ooh, what a thought. And it just gets a little frustrating to constantly hear all these like weird stereotypes and thoughts about millennials. And honestly, if we're going to talk about workplace wellness, like anything that has to do with stereotyping or bias or stigmas, really people don't respond well to that. It's stressful. And if you're a millennial in the workplace and people are talking about you and your group, your age group in a certain way, you're not going to feel good about that. You're going to be stressed out about it. You're probably not going to be as happy in your work environment. So I think it's something that organizations really need to think about, and managers and leaders need to stop creating these stereotypes for millennials. So we've written about this a lot, like Katina said. We've got a couple articles on our site, and I also did a TEDx talk on this topic. Because millennials, I mean, even when you look at the research, millennials are just really no different. They're just in an earlier life phase than maybe a Gen Xer or a baby boomer. Like they might be moving jobs a lot more often, but that's because they're trying to figure out what job they want to be in. And that's what the Gen Xers did and the baby boomers did when they were in their 20s and early 30s. Like, it's not that unique, but it's just as those other generations are moving out of that life phase, then they're looking back and then they're judging it. So I think you just need to really take perspective that what were you like in your 20s and all of your friends, and think about that a little bit before you start judging other groups and just realizing, oh, maybe they're in a different place in their life.
Yeah, and from a research perspective, like we're talking about, something that's really frustrating for us, knowing what the research on generational differences says, is that we hear this millennials thing, it's like a buzzword, and people talk about it all the time, like the millennial problem, and how do you manage millennials, and all this kind of stuff, and it's super interesting to us because I think it's just gotten to be something that's trendy, and when something's trendy, there's money to be made on it, and there's ways to spin it to make it, seem like it's the next big thing, and in reality, like Patricia's saying, what we're really just seeing is possible age effects, like what we don't have in the research, because people weren't doing this kind of research a long time ago, is something that followed people in different generations when they were in their 20s or in their teenage years to look at how people change over time. So what we're seeing now is maybe more of an effect of just being young. And people always look, we know from the psychology research, people look retrospectively back on themselves and think more positively of themselves and their capabilities and their abilities. You see your past self with rose-colored glasses. You make sense of everything. You tell yourself a very coherent linear story about your life when you look back on it. But in reality, it can be that it was a lot more messy than it seems when you're trying to make sense of it looking back. So people are like, oh, millennials are all over the place. They're switching jobs. They're doing this. They're doing that. And the reality is that that's just something that happens at earlier career stages. It's something that other generations have done too. And people think that they were themselves now then. And that's not true of any person. So what we're really frustrated about, but also passionate about spreading the word on, is that the stuff that millennials, are asking for, like better work-life balance or better employee engagement or things that are coming from the company, aren't entitled things that millennials are asking for. It's a response to an environment that has actually learned that those things are helpful for everybody, and they've grown up in a time where that's a possibility. And anybody who grew up in that environment, because those things actually help, like we always talk about, would take an opportunity to take advantage of those things and maybe would expect that their employer would have them, no matter what generation you were in.
Yeah, I think it's actually really interesting because if you actually corner someone from an older generation that's making these stereotypes, when you ask them oh, so you're saying that these millennials are entitled because they want to have balance in their life, then you say, well, do you want balance in your life? They're almost always going to say yes.
Right.
But then they're going to be like, oh, but I didn't have it when I was younger. And I'm like, yeah, that sucks. I'm sorry that you didn't. But that doesn't mean that younger generations shouldn't have the balance because you didn't have the balance. Really, what should be happening is everyone should be in a better, healthier work environment, and everyone should expect that from their work environment. So now that you've learned that this is something that's possible, you also would want that. And so do the millennials. So there's no reason to judge them for that. And then, just like we were saying before, when it comes to moving around jobs, like, there are statistics that show how many people in their 20s were changing jobs, when the Gen Xers were in their 20s and the baby boomers were in their 20s. And those are all, the numbers are all pretty consistent. So really, I think the big takeaway for anybody listening that, is a millennial is try to show people this data and this information so that you can, like, hopefully make an impact and change their mind about things, or show examples. Like, a lot of times they'll be like, oh, millennials suck because Debbie over there is always late. And they're like, oh, well, guess what? Joe is a baby boomer and he's always late too. Like, the same problems that you're seeing in millennials happened with all generations. Basically just people in general. There's variance in people. And then if you're a manager or a leader or, running a company, don't treat millennials differently. Like, don't, like, act like they need some sort of special babysitting or something because you think that they're different. Like, they're really not. Like, just treat all of your employees well, and all of your employees the same, and give them the same types of benefits. Don't, like, single anybody out, which you wouldn't do in a lot of cases because it's illegal. So why is it okay to do that with this generation, right? So again, this happened with previously. Like, there's a lot of articles about like pop media articles on, like, Gen Xers that basically say almost the exact same things as people say today about millennials. So just remember that, and, like, stop singling out the younger generation every time they come into the workplace.
Yeah, every generation thinks that the generation after them is, like, crazy kids, all these crazy kids. And I know, like, in conversations that I've had with other employers and things like that, they're like, oh, like, in my generation, everybody was like this and everybody's like that. In a generation, there's way more variability within the generation than there is between them. So you have, a high likelihood of not having things in common with people in your own generation. So it's not this blanket statement. And I think if we treat whole generations of people like one blanket thing, you're going to miss a lot of nuance about how to make people happier and healthier at work. And you're also going to miss a lot of the similarities that exist between people just because they're people. And these people just happen to have access to technology that made it easier for them to work from home and do things that no longer make sense. Like, maybe come into the office and spend 1 million hours commuting for a job that you can easily do remotely. Like, things that don't make sense anymore because of technology, and people recognize they don't make sense, so they ask for those kinds of options. And that kind of flexibility doesn't mean that they're entitled. It's just that they're working in a different environment. Mm-hmm. So I think, ultimately it's important to just keep in mind that the world is changing. Things are changing around us. There may be different types of expectations or different things that workplaces can offer to make the workplace better. And if there's a particular generation that's more exposed to that and they're asking for more of that just because that's been their experience, that's probably a good thing for everyone. So listen to your crazy kids. Don't write them off.
I agree. I will say one, like, fun note is that, the thing that generations share between themselves, so, like, millennials, they all grew up with technology being somewhat more accessible than maybe the Gen Xers. They were within, like, a formative age when 9/11 happened. Like, things like that. That's what is similar across generations, is the environment around them. But other than that, everybody's an individual. So, like, yes, you'll see differences in generations when you want to talk about Top Gun as the Gen Xer, and then you talk to me, and I've now seen Top Gun because my Gen Xer boss made me. Like, I had never seen it, and those types of things might come up, but those are fun things that you can work through and shouldn't be a problem. The other stereotypes that we're seeing are the problem, and those are the things that really don't matter. And like we were saying, the similarities between the generations is real, and the differences between people are consistent across all generations. You're going to have lazy people in all generations. You're going to have, super ambitious people in all generations. It doesn't matter what generation you are in to see those types of people.
People are people. Good stuff makes people happy. Bad stuff makes people unhappy. Do good stuff for everybody. Don't do bad stuff. And everyone will be better off regardless of what generation they're in.
Yes. So now we'd love to hear from you. Let us know your thoughts. What do you think about millennials and this topic? You can email us at workerbeing@gmail.com, which is WORKRBEEING. And you can also read more. Go to our website at workerbeing.com. There's a couple articles there, and you can also find a link to my TEDx talk if you want to hear more about the millennials.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye. The Worker Being podcast is hosted by us, Patricia Grabarek
And Katina Sawyer, and produced by Allie Johnson.